Yarns for Pirates, and I'm going to be showing you how to ease in the princess seams on the Gala Gown. It's nice and simple once you see somebody do it, so let's dive in. Alright, here we are. I have my front center bodice. I have the low cut option cut here. And then I have my two side pieces cut mirror image. You'll notice that all the front bodice have front bodice pieces have a single notch. The back bodice pieces will have a double notch, and that's just to help you keep track of what is the front and what is the back. I'm pulling out some clips, and the first thing I'm going to do is align my pieces at the bottom edge. And then I'm going to align them at the top. Remember, you want your pieces to align at the seam allowance. Our seam allowance is 1/2 inch. So make sure you don't align this tiny tip. You want to align the 1/2 inch point, so that when you go to sew, it will then give you enough fabric to have that 1/2 inch mark. Now I'm just going to align my 2 notches. So now I just have 3 clips. The top and bottom and the bust point where the notch is. Okay, I'm going to scoot you down a little bit so you can, and again I matched them at the top and the bottom and the bust point. And now I'm just going to add a few more clips in between those points. You don't want to ease anything at this bottom section, the waist and under bust. You don't have any curves really happening there, so you won't have to ease. And then starting closer to the bust point, you will have some easing to do. You have more curves at the top, so it might feel like you're easing more than the bottom. It's just because those are opposite curves. But the top from here to here will meet at the seam allowance. And then you do have a little more easing right around the bust point. And what that does is give you some roundness right here once the seam is sewn. So you will notice there's some extra fabric on this curved part, and when you sew it all up, you'll see it kind of creates a 3D place for your bust. I always like to start at the bottom. I'm not sure why. It's just a habit. I'm going to be sewing mine with my serger. Get that 1/2 inch. I'm going to be trimming off 1/4 inch. Oh, mine didn't want to take off. It is always nice to put the fabric with the more curve, so your side piece on the bottom, because your sewing machine will naturally help you ease that in. It moves the bottom quicker than the top fabric, so it naturally helps ease that bit of fabric in. So there is our completed arm side. This will just need to press. It's really important to press your princess seams. Let me turn off the light so you can see a little bit better. It's really important to press your princess seams. You don't want them to be wavy since you had to ease it in a little bit. You most likely have a tiny bit of wave. And as you can see, my fabric doesn't lay flat here, and that's because that is our bust point. We don't want it to lay flat. It's giving us extra room right at the apex of the bust. So we're going to press the seam, but just know that it will always have this little bump here, and that's good. That's what our bodies look like. I always press my seam allowances towards the side seam on princess seams. And I always leave this little serger tail until I sew on the arm or lining for the tank top option. You want to be careful not to trim off your tails too soon. They can unravel, and you don't want it to unravel before you stitch that seam and secure that seam. All right, and that's how you sew in a princess seam. I'm going to show you one on the back as well. That was the front bodice, which again has lots of curves for a bust, at least on the adult. And now I'm going to show you a back piece. The back piece has a lot less curves because I drafted for an hourglass and we're just not as curvy on the back as we are on the front. But again, I'm going to pin at the bottom edge, the top edge, and then at those notches. I'm going to make sure I'm pinning at the 1/2 inch seam allowance, not at the very point. And then I have my double notch on the back. I usually cut mine as a plateau instead of like a double mountain. And as you can see, these ones they match up. There's really no easing right here. And again, that's because we don't want to create a place for a bust on the back. So these just match perfectly at the seam allowance. There's really not a lot of easing on this one. And this is how the youth will be too. The youth is not drafted for a bust. It's drafted for a flat chest. And so their princess seams will ease in much like this, where it is just matching at the seam allowance. They are still opposite curves, but it will create a flat piece. So again, I would press, press, press. You always want to press your princess seams, get them nice and flat. I like to press my seams out towards the side seam on the back as well. And as you can see, this piece lays completely flat, and that's what we want. We don't want this one to create any kind of extra room anywhere. And so this is looking nice and flat and good. Again, I like to leave this little tail right here until I stitch that final stitch. And same with the bottom. I like to leave those tails. Don't trim them off until you are actually sewing the next seam. Alright, I hope that helps getting your princess seams perfect. Remember to press, press, press once you're done. And I hope they go nice and smoothly for you.